Ricochet, Je'Von Evans, crazy exchange on Twitter. Velveteen Dream, Partick Clark wants to come back, and Benjamin Shelton. Sorry. Shelton Benjamin has had some interesting things to say. We'll talk about it and a lot more. Of course, this is WrstlXtra. Yo. This is WrstlXtra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate. Always joined by my tag team partner. Say his name. He shall appear. The omnipresent man, the professor that is Gerard Bonner. Let's get straight into this one. This one was crazy. We saw things pop off in the middle of the week. Twitter was going crazy. Tweets were deleted and all the rest of it. But there are more than enough people who are quick on the mark, saving, screenshotting, all the rest of it, and we've seen it all. This interesting exchange of words between AEW's Ricochet and NXT's Je'Von Evans. Usually when we talk about NXT and AEW, and it's happened already yesterday, today, the last couple of weeks, we were usually talking about their collision of dates,
right, for
their PLEs, for their pay-per-views, for their special events, whatever it is. But this week, the talk was between two of their stars who, got into a bit of a war of words. To give people the backstory, if you've been living under a rock and you don't follow wrestling whatsoever, basically what had happened was Ricochet, I think a post was posted on X with Je'Von Evans, the exchange between him during NXT's 25-man battle road to determine the next number one contender for overthrowing his NXT championship. Yeah. We saw this amazing sequence between Je'Von Evans and oh my God, I've forgotten
Sean Legacy.
Sean Legacy. Oh my God, give that man a contract, put him on NXT straight away. He was amazing. But it was that was shared, a video of their little exchange in the ring. And the response from Ricochet was something to the liking of, I would squash him. That was then followed by Je'Von Evans responding to that, talking about the position that Ricochet is now in, and he's not winning any championships. He's only wrestling in front of 2,000 people, while Je'Von Evans is being trained by Shawn Michaels and all the rest of it. Ricochet's then responded to that. But I think the most interesting part for most people, and the first thing that I saw, was then Je'Von Evans' response to that as well, talking about, mentioning Tony Khan and Ricochet working for basically a cokehead. Je'Von's tweets were subsequently deleted, but as I said, people saw it. It was shared around the place and whatnot. It became a bit of big news for a few days moving forward. My question to you, Gerard, is how detrimental could that possibly be to either party? I'm guessing if it's for anyone, it's probably more on the side of Je'Von Evans, because he made an accusation, I guess, more than anything. But do you feel as though there could possibly be consequences in behind the scenes for Je'Von Evans and that whole exchange?
Well, first, I want to shout out Sean Legacy. For a few reasons. I've worked with Sean Legacy for a few years in Southern Honor and in IWE, called a number of his matches. An amazing guy. It's incredible to watch him get this kind of attention. And really, you could make the argument that he was the centerpiece of this entire argument. So shout out to Sean Legacy, who has since put out a tweet challenging Je'Von Evans for a one-on-one, which please sign me up, take all my money, right?
Let's go.
With that, getting to the subject at hand, in terms of whether or not this will be, if there's some sort of repercussions for Je'Von Evans, I've heard statements about, them being WWE pulling their talent in for some social media training. I have said on this show before that I don't believe that AEW stars are having social media training, PR, that type of thing, because they literally can go rogue at any moment. With all of that said, I don't think that there will be massive repercussions for Je'Von Evans. Granted, what he said isn't ideal for a WWE superstar to say. I do think fans are always entertained when you get these cross-promotional wars. And, I'm reminded that so often in the wrestling world, fans are so smart, put that in air quotes for those listening, they're so smart that they think everything is work. Nothing is actually what you see.
Right.
There's absolutely nothing to gain for either party or either brand by this kind of exchange. So I think you have to be good with the fact that these are human beings just like you and I, who on occasion, if you get into a Twitter war, these things happen. I think Je'Von certainly, there's likely more responsibility going to fall on him because of the company he works for specifically.
Right.
Granted, I don't think it's going to be us seeing Je'Von falling down the card or anything like that. I think if anything, it's just kind of a, hey, here's how you conduct yourself in these social media streets, and you cannot allow yourself to get caught up into these kinds of things. I think people forget, again, Je'Von, and this is not an excuse, he just turned 20 years old, right? So there are certain ways and things that he might not think about that an older Ricochet would likely think about. So if you're looking at people who've been in these social streets, who know how to handle these, you would say that Ricochet, the onus falls on him. But I think because of the company that Je'Von represents, the onus, there's a responsibility that falls on him. Either way, I don't think either of them are going to get any degree of punishment or anything like that. Again, I don't see Je'Von moving down the card. If anything, I see this being an opportunity, given so many new stars coming down the pipe, for WWE to kind of tighten up their social media training so that the wrestlers who are a part of this will understand how to conduct themselves in these streets.
For sure. I kind of see it as, sometimes when an incident happens at work and everyone kind of gets pulled into training, for just because one incident and whatnot. But,
right.
It makes sense. It's a great opportunity to do something like that. There's been talk, and I was thinking the same thing. There's been talk that, Je'Von maybe have been kind of baited in. In a sense where, it's been seen so many times, and we've seen him playing, the character on TV as well. Ricochet doing his whole heel thing, and he kind of, expresses that or takes that into Twitter as well and whatnot. On top of the possibility of him being baited in, do you feel as though Ricochet doing this is probably too far, in the sense of, like, this isn't okay? So the reason why people are saying that Je'Von has been baited in is because Ricochet has made that same remark almost word for word on multiple other wrestlers' posts or whatever else. I've seen one where he responded to something about Kevin Knight, Speedball Mike Bailey, who he recently had a couple matches with and stuff like that. Yeah. So you can look at that. Obviously, with them being in the same company, that it's just him playing the part and all the rest of it. Is him then doing it with someone outside of his company, kind of taking the whole persona or the heel thing too far? And also, could this possibly be Ricochet just being Ricochet, or should I say Trevor Man being Trevor Man?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to land there. And here's why I say that, because remember, we had discussed here on this show several months ago, maybe even a year or so ago, Ricochet's inability to cut a promo, his inability to talk and things of that nature. Suddenly, that is the whole world is opened up to him in AEW. And now he's obviously much more aggressive and things of that nature. I am not aware, and I don't want anybody to come for me on this, but AEW does not have a formalized training facility as the WWE does. The WWE's got the PC. They've got promo classes. They've got all of these things where there's a structure where you can go if you are lacking in that area and go do that. I don't know. I've not heard that AEW has something similar. So that tells me that somewhere in here, Trevor Mann is showing up. It says to me that, there's not, I tend to believe that just as WWE has made the PC and its information relatively public knowledge, if AEW, because they have been criticized for not having a PC, if they had something like that, they would gladly tell people just to look better in the court of public opinion. So at this point, I have to be able to say that this is Trevor Mann. Ricochet is showing his true colors, and anybody is susceptible. Anybody can get some of this, and that's where he is right now. So I think that's where, again, why the training would have to happen on the WWE side, because if it is the wild, wild west in AEW and in other independent spaces, and I'm not calling AEW independent, you guys know what I mean. If there is not training on how to handle yourself in social media spaces, somebody has to be the responsible figure. So to answer your question, I 100% think this is Trevor Mann. I don't think this is a character. I think he could be trolling as part of who he is. I think he could be, going off on people. And at some point, it happens so much to where you either say he is fully committed to his character or this is who he is. And I'd like to feel like it is a mixture of the two. This is who he is. And that element of who he is blends into what gets presented on screen.
And I think I echoed your response as well in your thinking, because even for me, we've seen it in the past. You talk about maybe about a year ago or just before he left the WWE and all the rest of it. Even before that, there were many times that we've seen him respond to fans' criticism, posts, opinions, all that kind of thing. You know what I mean? And this is while he was in the WWE, where he could have been pulled to one side, or where there is that training, or a level of higher responsibility or expectancy with social media and stuff like that, and he was still doing that then, or was easily affected, and as I said, respond to fans' posts and stuff like that. Even with I shared with you guys a week or two ago, he responded to something that we posted when we were talking about his, I think it was after his first match in the Continental Classic, or his first loss in the Continental Classic. We were questioning, so why did he lose and what's going to happen with him next and whatnot. Right. And we're talking, 20 plus weeks ago that this post was posted, but he's responded just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? I mean, I can honestly say since then, obviously, we've changed our tune and we've openly said we got it wrong or whatever, and he's on a much better place and doing great stuff now, and everyone's talking about him and he's the talk of AEW at the moment and all the rest of it, and that's great. Yeah. But this is why I question: is it Ricochet being the heel on AEW, or is this Trevor Mann being Trevor Mann? Because I'm like, why respond to that specific thing?
Yeah.
What was the point? Right. Going back to, still keeping on the subject of Ricochet, but going back to what's been happening for him in the ring. He had a very interesting sequence the other day. Obviously, he was in a match and then had an exchange with the legendary, as he put it, Zach Gowen. Zach Gowen, you know what? I heard this stat, and I'm like, what? Apparently, Zach Gowen has not been in a ring or on a wrestling TV show in 20 years.
It's crazy.
How?
That's
I know it was a
crazy.
long time ago, but 20 years is crazy.
Right. That's crazy.
Crazy to me. But they're set to have a match very soon. What are your thoughts on that? Zach Gowen in AEW, Ricochet going at it with him. Where is this going?
I have no idea. This is one of those moments in pro wrestling where you're just like, what? Like, what are we gaining from this? I don't. Okay, wow. I don't know if this is AEW's response to the prosthetic leg used at the TLC a couple of weeks ago. Like, I don't know, right? Like, it's just one of those things that makes absolutely no sense. Why in the world, in a place that's supposed to be where the best wrestle, why do we have someone who's not been on television in 20 years showing up against one of your top stars? And I don't mean a wrestler who had a massive name that we just couldn't get enough of. This wasn't like, sorry, Haven. This wasn't like when Goldberg came back and he'd been gone for 12 years, right? I know Haven's like punching the air right now. But my point to that is there was somebody, not Haven, not other people. There was probably Big E who was asking for Goldberg, right? Who is asking for Zach Gowen? Most of the community that currently watches AEW probably never watched Zach Gowen in a WWE ring, right? Likely didn't see him anywhere on the independents. And I'm I don't know what the bigger tragedy is here. Them having this match or them taking someone who's not been on television 20 years and putting them on primetime television ahead of many of the wrestlers they already have in that company who are fighting for television space. So that to me, like, instead of doing that, give us a quality women's match, a second one instead of one on the card, right? Why are we getting Zach Gowen versus Ricochet? I don't. In a company with a Speedball Mike Bailey, a Will Ospreay, a Swerve Strickland. I mean, my God, if you need to pull somebody from New Japan. But why in the world are we grabbing Zach Gowen, whose only real claim to fame is his time in WWE 20 years ago? This one's got me scratching my head.
It's crazy to me because, I'm not sure if I'm guessing they were in his hometown or something like that. That's where it was. And
this is valuable television time. Right.
But my thing is this, like, for that segment to happen on that night and Ricochet walks over the leg and blah, 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 and that's the end of it. Cool. You're in his hometown. We do the little thing, hometown hero, whatever it is. Boom, we're done. For them to then have a match, for what? For what exactly? Ricochet has already shown his heel, his heel side by doing what he did to him and whatnot. Leave it there. Done. End of. Then we go into a match, or someone saves Zach Gowen or something, or confronts Ricochet afterwards, or whatever it is, and then they have a match. Why are we having a match with Zach Gowen? I don't get it. Ricochet is doing such good stuff as a heel.
Right.
That he can be thrown into, put him and Speedball in a proper feud. Yes, they've had matches, but it's kind of like been multi-person matches and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Have them have a proper feud, or Kevin Knight, or whoever it is. You know what I mean? One of the new guys, or someone that hasn't been seen on TV in a while, or isn't getting enough of a push, or what? Just anyone. Get Anthony Bowens.
Yeah. I mean, you have plenty of guys that you can pull from to have a match. I don't even see how this furthers anything that Ricochet's doing. Ricochet's already is certainly in the upper echelon of AEW right now. This doesn't take him anywhere. I don't know. And God forbid if Zach Gowen wins this match.
Oh no! Could never. Let's not think about Let's not go there.
He'd really be in our DMs then.
That would be ridiculous. I'd be in his.
Yeah, right. Like, sir, what's happening
What are
right
you doing?
now?
What are you doing? What are you doing? Stepping away from AEW a little bit. There was someone else. I mean, we're going to be talking about quite a few people that have been on social media these past like 7 days or so. But there's another guy who, you know, was very much the talk of the town. And whenever he speaks, even breathes, it's the biggest story in pro wrestling. That being Partick Clark, formerly known as the Velveteen Dream. He was quite vocal. I believe he posted a video on his social medias over the last few days, and kind of commemorated the right word, but commemorated him not being in the WWE for about 5 years now. Mm-hmm. What had happened is that basically he was responding to news of a former WWE wrestler, I believe it's Duke the Dumpster Drosy, who has been charged with sexual misconduct of a minor, or inappropriate stuff with a minor, or whatever it is. And then, of course, because that was also something that Velveteen was accused of, never charged, never went to court, nothing formal ever happened, but he was accused of that. It kind of subsequently led to him being released from the WWE. He's then, you know, it's then ignited him to say something and kind of plead to the fans, you know, let's try and get him back into the WWE and stuff like that. But he also had something to say about, you know, asking for an apology from those who continuously accuse him, didn't want to hear his side and stuff like that. You've been in spaces recently where Partick Clark has kind of made a comeback on the indies. You've been in those spaces. In your mind, do you feel as though he should get a second chance? Is he ready for a second chance based on what you've seen yourself? Or do you have any type of opinion on that itself? I'm putting you in, you know, in the tough spot I am, but you know.
Yeah. I will also say this. There's and I don't know if this was in the same video or a separate video that I saw, where he said that he wanted to ruin pro wrestling for everyone. And he said, if I can't have pro wrestling, no one else will. And so I'll say this. 2025 is an interesting time. I think really ever since 2020, when we really started seeing the Me Too movement, there's been a lot of conversation about people being held accountable for their actions. About people who have been disenfranchised being able to have a voice. And we've seen in some of these cases where people, you know, were accused and, you know, sometimes the law was involved. Oftentimes, many of them lost their jobs. We've seen some occasions where it's been proven that these accusations were false. Names like Zachary Wentz and Enzo and even Odyssey Jones recently comes to mind. You know, the dangerous thing is that in the court of public opinion, it can be very difficult. So I am one who believes that if you are willing to do the work for redemption, then you should have the opportunity to work again. Let me say it again. If you are willing to do the work of redemption, you should get the opportunity to work again. With that said, what you do, number one, in terms of your road to redemption is up to you. And then what you do with that second chance is up to you. And so I think that any wrestler who, first of all, wants to be in this business has to recognize that when you do certain things, there are certain consequences connected to it. And particularly any sort of sexual misconduct, you know, it's kind of a zero tolerance kind of policy for that. if you do the work, when I say do the work, I mean, like, seriously, whatever was going on that created that scenario is no longer a thing, that the people that were impacted were apologized, that recompense has happened, and you desire to want to work again, you should get that opportunity. You should also understand, though, that with that opportunity comes a certain level of responsibility, that there's going to be difficulty thrown your way until you're able to produce more content that puts those difficulties in the back burner. We've seen people, make comebacks and things of that nature. I just think this particular case is a difficult one to speak on just because of what I've had a chance to eyewitness personally. And so what I will say is this: I want everybody to do the work that's needed to, first of all, be well. If the mindset of Partick Clark, based solely off of his video, is to ruin pro wrestling, because if he can't have it, no one else will, that doesn't sound like a healthy perspective. It reminds me of the people who say, well, if I can't have you, nobody else will. That's not healthy. And so I hope for Partick that he's able to come to whatever resolve he can come to be able to land in a place where, if he decides that he wants to go after pro wrestling, that he does what's necessary to do that. If he's not interested in doing that, then pursue another career and allow pro wrestling to be what pro wrestling is. In the history of this business, well over 100 years, no one person has taken the business down. And I don't think that there is one person that will take the business down. And I think whenever people go on campaigns to rid the world of something, we always have to ask the motive behind that. So relative to Partick Clark, I want him to be well, whatever wellness looks like for him. And if he decides to pursue the sport of pro wrestling, that he will do that with a pure desire to be able to be involved in the sport. And if he doesn't want to do that, then, I want to wish him well, and that he finds the space that he wants to land
in. For sure. I say this slightly in jest, but at the same time, I think there's still some kind of truth to what you're saying. Like the whole ruin pro wrestling, we heard that very recently from John Cena.
We did,
and that we all know was in character, and it comes with what it comes with, and it was a heel turn and whatnot. For a man like Partick Clark, who's not necessarily in the eyes of many anymore, or nowhere near as many, and obviously not working for a major company, for him to say that kind of feels a bit too true. And also based on, from things we've seen, things we've read, and I don't mean reports, but I just mean like even on, his own Twitter and, Instagram, social media in general, from experiences that, we've both had in different ways of Partick Clark. The bitterness always seems to be there in some way. And for me, that's the unfortunate part, because I've always been a massive fan of his from day one. Always, and I can confidently say I always will be, in terms of him as a wrestler. But there's always been this overshadowing of his attitude, his bitterness, his so and so and whatnot, that regardless of the accusations, he wasn't charged and all the rest of it. If we lived in this world where we stuck by the law and the laws of the land and whatnot, he should get a second chance. Sure. And we've seen people do worse who are still wrestling now.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So we should get a second chance in that regard. But as you said, if your conduct then, or your road to redemption, or what you do with that second chance, or your approach to all of this kind of doesn't fit people's standard or people's requests or whatever it is, then you go into struggle. You go into struggle. It doesn't matter how great you are, how much potential you had, how much of a star people expected you to be, all that kind of stuff. If the attitude isn't great, you know what I mean? It's not going to work out. I always think of friends of mine who I know that were very great, you know, at certain sports. And, you know, you just think that they're going to go on to do great things and whatnot. But then you see, I know of someone personally who was in my class at school, amazing at football, soccer for those who are watching. And he was absolutely phenomenal, phenomenal. Probably one of the best people I've ever seen play the game. But then it was actually his younger brother who wasn't as good as him who made it.
Wow.
And I know for a fact that at that time it was down to his attitude. It was his talent was up there, but it was down to his attitude. So, as I said, attitude makes a massive difference to so many things. It doesn't matter your potential, your abilities. It makes a difference. So I'm hoping, there's still a hope in my head. I still have a dream, a Velveteen dream, that he can make it back in some way. I do. I think I always will. But at the same time, we have to be very realistic and honest with ourselves about how difficult it's going to be, not just because of himself as well, but as you said, you know, based on the accusation, based on the circumstances and all the rest of it, it's a difficult thing to come back from. Very difficult.
Well, it is, and I think this is the other thing. One of the things that I tend to tell people in kind of counseling them is you are not required to rehearse what you've been through. No. And so part of the issue here is we're 5 years removed from that, right? So it is possible that there is a whole segment of people who, when they see him, won't necessarily think of that. True. But if in every interview that you're doing and if everything that you're doing, you're leading with that information, you're putting it out on Front Street for people. And I think that's part of the major issue here is he hasn't gone out, wrestled, and then continued to wrestle and continue to create different kinds of content. If you can create different kinds of content to cause the people to have something else to talk about, then they will. But that wasn't the case here. And so, you know, that's the concerning thing for him. And again, this is also where you have to try to separate the art from the artist. The art of the Velveteen Dream is second to none. And he can still get in a ring and he can still make magic in a ring. It's the artist where the issue is coming into play right now. And, you know, if the artist can't find the kind of healing to be able to create great art, then the artist needs to work on that.
Very true. Very true. Speaking of people's actions having repercussions and never leaving them.
This is a perfect example. Holy
exactly.
Cow.
Literally.
Cow.
You know, I mentioned already there are people who have done worse or you know, probably not necessarily done worse as well, but you know, been found to be guilty of what they were accused of, but yet still made their way back. That man being one Terry Bollea, known as Hulk Hogan, back in the headlines this past week, but kind of almost indirectly, but at the same time, because of his own actions, it's put him in this position. A one Shelton Benjamin of the Hurt Syndicate, one half of the AEW World Tag Team Champions, of course, was very vocal on social media about Hulk Hogan. There were clips flying around. I don't know how old these clips are. I can't remember. I believe they're quite old, but they came back around, resurfaced. One from TMZ, another from when he was on the Pat McAfee show, I believe, where he's mentioned Brock Lesnar, a young Kurt Angle, and a young Benjamin Shelton. I'm not sure who that is, but I believe we understood it to be Shelton Benjamin, of course.
Clearly.
Shelton Benjamin just wasn't happy about it at all. And as much as this whole thing kind of came out, people were responding thinking that it was just the simple fact that Hulk Hogan said his name wrong, calling him Benjamin Shelton, not Shelton Benjamin. But the issue that Shelton Benjamin had, and the reason why he, kind of asked Hulk Hogan to keep his name out of his mouth, has a lot more to do with, obviously, his actions, him being found out, the videos of him using the N-word so many times, about a guy that his daughter was seeing at the time, and all this kind of stuff. And then on top of that, the reason why he was, so many people are still upset was because of this, I guess I'll use your thing, the air quotes, apology that he made when he first made his way back to the WWE.
Did he apologize though?
Right.
I think
exactly
that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, he apologized for being caught on film, or not apologized, or just made mention of, or blamed himself for being, I don't know, being filmed, basically. That didn't stick with a lot of people. Shelton Benjamin was vocal about that at the time. I believe some of the members of the New Day, if not all of them, were vocal about it as well. Titus O'Neil had something to say. MVP, of course, had something to say, including something to say about this recent exchange as well. I don't even know what the question really is in this now, because it's quite obvious as to how ridiculous this whole thing is. But in your mind, what are your feelings when it comes to all of this stuff, and why, of all people, is Hulk Hogan mentioned Shelton Benjamin's name?
Hulk Hogan. I think if the door on Hulk Hogan had closed, say, 2002, 2003, the story of Hulk Hogan would have been that of a true superhero. I mean, a man who came into pro wrestling, had a rough way to start, found his way, after the Rocky III movie, came to the WWE, skyrocketed, had a second and third lease on life in WCW with the NWO, came back to a hero's welcome in WWE. Like, it's a great story of our childhood hero, coming back, and we're all loving him. If it stopped in 2003, man, it would have been great. What we've learned in these last 20 plus years is that Hulk Hogan isn't who we thought he was. And what's so interesting about this is there was a video that also came out this week where he was on the Ariel Helwani show, where he says, I just think it's cool. People think it's cool to boo me. I still don't know why they boo me. And all I can do is continue to just keep doing what I'm doing. I don't know if my lighting was bad, but the irony of him saying that with a tan that almost made him look like me, I was like, okay, Hogan, I see what's happening here. So to me, why is he mentioning Shelton Benjamin or Benjamin Shelton? Hulk Hogan, I want to say this very carefully. Hulk Hogan has a love-hate relationship with the truth. And most of that relationship is hate, right? He's not a fan of telling the truth. So whatever crazy stories he can come up with, he will. And instead of, it would be smart of him if he really didn't like people that look like us, someone like me in the background, if he didn't like that, then just don't mention anybody that looks like us. You could have said Brock Lesnar's name and Kurt Angle's name, and nobody would have had a problem. Right. But you're going to mention Shelton Benjamin's name, then you say it wrong, which is equally disrespectful. Because nobody on planet Earth has ever confused Benjamin Shelton with Shelton Benjamin. No. It's never happened. No. So to me, kind of the unique tie-in here is you got Hulk Hogan, who refuses to take ownership for what he's done, almost 10 years later, after being removed from Tough Enough, after, the WWE saying, we want you back. No, not quite. I mean, remember when Saturday Night's Main Event got the reboot and they were supposed to bring Hogan on and the people booed him like crazy at Raw and Netflix. And they were like, let's pause that, Hogan.
Yeah.
They're going to be in Tampa, Hogan's hometown, next week. And there's not going to be any Hulk Hogan. They took that money for his sponsorship, though, and they'll play those commercials briefly. My point is, Hogan refuses to take ownership for what he's done. You mentioned all the people who said something. Mark Henry was very, very vocal about a path that Hogan could have taken that Hogan didn't want to take. So Hogan just wants to still somehow be relevant, no matter what the story is. And so if I take it back to Partick Clark, look at the example of Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, the biggest star in the history of this business, was not able to escape because he refused to take ownership. Now, if you're going to take ownership for what you did or didn't do, right? If you're saying, hey, I was never charged, et cetera, great. All right. Move on from it and stop doing things that remind people. The reason we still don't like Hogan is Hogan still is doing things that is reminding us of the apology we never got. How dare you get onto a public screen and talk about you don't know why people don't like you, yet you're tanned up to look like me to remind us all of what you said. So that's why Shelton Benjamin's mad. And Hogan, again, because he's just unwilling to stay away from the spotlight for a little bit and be the actual believer he says he is, which I don't believe that either. At this point, just be quiet. Just go off into the sunset, enjoy your retirement. You still have, people are still going to recognize you. You've taken on to the Trump campaign. Like, do whatever it is that you're going to do, but you don't have to do it at the expense, again, of black wrestlers.
Right. And for me, he's kind of like the epitome of, that the white American that can't, well, basically white America. Let's be very real about it. It is that, because it's this lack of accountability for your actions. It's this delusion that that he has as well of his own character and where he is now, thinking that he's still 1992 Hulk Hogan, like he's loved by the people and whatnot, and the boos are somehow cool. Like he likened it to I believe it was to John Cena's heel turn or Dominic Mysterio and people like that. They're supposed to be booed.
Right.
When you came out, you were supposed to be cheered, and the opposite happened.
Right.
How that's cool and how you kind of twist that is beyond me. And for me, there's almost, and I don't even say this as a joke, there's almost a level of, checking into his mental state when if this is how far he's going, if this is how deluded he is in thinking that it's cool or trying to turn it into something, or not being able to admit as to what it actually is, or not seeing it. It's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy to me. And like you said, he's done so many things, and since then that reminds us of who and how he is. We've started to hear more stories, whether that's from before or now.
And we're hearing the wrestlers come out. The wrestlers are starting to talk about what Hogan was like, and so
of course. Even in recent times as well, even as recent as when he was, backstage and, at the Netflix launch and all the rest of it as well. That whole thing with sacking the black female that was working for his beer company when he found out she was black, and like just disappear from the public eye, basically. Just don't do it. Just don't.
Because we're not asking for Hogan.
Right. And for the most part, the majority is not asking for Hogan, and I understand. And it can never be denied. And as you said yourself, one of the biggest stars, biggest names in pro wrestling history. You mentioned Hulk Hogan. He's literally the epitome of the household name.
Absolutely.
When it comes to pro wrestling, we've had the greatest of greatest stars: Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, Ric Flair, John Cena, Roman Reigns, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and those are relatively household names. But mention Hulk Hogan, everyone knows who that is.
Absolutely.
So he's got that for himself, and I get it. But at the same time, let's just not. Let's just stop now. You know, even WWE holding onto him again. There's a level I get, but at the same time, let's get away from all of that. It's crazy. It's crazy to me. Everything kind of just ties in together today. It's so mad. Onto the next topic. This one is something I would love to celebrate, but unfortunately for me, it kind of comes with an underlining issue or possible underlining issue. On TNA this past Thursday, Alicia Fox, formerly known as Alicia Fox, now going by I believe her real name Victoria Crawford, made her TNA debut, in-ring debut. I think she made a wrestling appearance in Reality of Wrestling. I believe it was last year, but before then, hadn't been in a ring for I believe over 5 years. She made a debut, had a match. She's expected to face Masha Slamovich for the TNA Knockouts Championship. She had a match against I believe a local star. I believe it's Chris Bay's girlfriend as well.
Brittany Brooks, I think. Yeah,
Brittany Brooks, that's the one. Brittany Brooks. Quick match, got the victory. Out comes Masha Slamovich to, confront her. They go at it. Who comes to save her? But Tessa Blanchard. The interesting bit about all of this, and the reason why it is connected as well to this whole Hogan thing and people trying to make a comeback and people taking responsibility for their actions and everything that we're talking about, this seem to be talking about this show, is that the way Victoria Crawford came into TNA was through NXT's Robert Stone. He seems to be having this war of, control, I guess, with Santino Marella. But when I saw all of this, I'm like, okay, why is Robert Stone of NXT bringing in Victoria Crawford? And it didn't make sense. Then I see Tessa Blanchard getting involved. And now I'm like, are they doing this? And ever since TNA and WWE made their partnership, much more official, it was around within maybe weeks or so, probably even days. I can't remember, but weeks or days of Tessa Blanchard making her comeback to TNA. Since that news popped, I've always said, honestly, if not for anything else, one of the biggest reasons why they're doing this is to try and get Tessa Blanchard into the WWE. It's a way, it could possibly be a way of that happening. Now that I've seen how this is transpiring, I'm like, this might be the way that they're doing it. I would expect. And the joke is, after this whole thing on Thursday, Tessa and Crawford are now going to be in a tag team match with Masha Slamovich and NXT's Nikita Lyons. So Nikita Lyons is coming to TNA.
That's interesting.
It's a matter of time. It's a matter of time before we see Tessa Blanchard cross the line to NXT. Robert Stone's on there every single week. Nikita Lyons is coming in from NXT. She was on Evolve, where Robert Stone is one of the commentators too. There are too many connections that make me feel as though this is about to happen. If this happens, what do you expect the reaction to be from the general public? Because here's the thing as well, before you answer, here's the other thing as well. We've talked about this so many times, or in the past few weeks, about black stars and obviously NXT having a wealth of black stars. And they're getting over and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I didn't get to mention, I've always thought about, is one of the reasons that these black stars are getting over and all the rest of it, I think has some part to play, is the fact that most of the crowd that are at NXT at the PC, most of them, or the louder ones, or the ones that seem to have much more influence when you watch it week to week, are the black fans. We saw this the whole thing with when Swerve and Booker T got into it on the socials and whatnot. There's a video that came up the following, after NXT the following Tuesday, with the crowd, got this little chant going, Swerve, we're coming for you, Swerve, we're coming for you. Imagine Tessa Blanchard walks into the PC, out into that, goes towards that ring. What is that reaction going to be from that crowd?
Well, I'll say this. I think there's a reason why they won't pull that trigger. And that's because, here's the reason why they won't. Because of the reaction she's getting in TNA. They literally cannot drown out the "she's a racist" chants that are happening all over the country in TNA with Tessa Blanchard. And I'm not just talking about like in cities that you might think have a large African-American population.
Right.
Right. San Antonio, LA, like so many places by far are having these chants. It seems like, the connections were less than 6 degrees of separation, but I don't feel like they're going to pull that trigger. And here's why. Because there are certain, it seems as though there are certain things WWE just won't touch. Again, if they won't bring Hogan back after the way Hogan had a response at what was supposed to be their biggest night, Raw on Netflix, think about it. They didn't have Hogan anywhere around for WrestleMania. They haven't had Hogan around for Saturday night's main event. They haven't had they have not had Hogan, and Hogan was supposed to be at the San Antonio Saturday night's main event just a couple of weeks after Raw on Netflix, and they canceled that. And they've had no more talks of Hogan. I think they don't want to welcome that kind of a reaction. And so that's why I don't think it'll happen, because I don't think she gets in the PC, let alone gets out of the PC. I don't see it happening. I will also say that, one of the big reasons why so many of these stars are getting over in NXT that are African-American, I think it's bigger than just that crowd. I think they have to translate they're translating well on TV. So again, here's the thing. People already don't like when the WWE has to bleep out certain chants from the crowd because they are expletives. There is no way, and The Rock means no way, that the WWE is going to allow a "she's a racist" chant on their television. There's no way. They're not even going to take the chance because it's too risky for them. Of anybody at play, they have too much to lose. The sponsorships are too great. They're on the CW for NXT. You can't do that. The CW at one point was like the home for Black television. You can't do. So for me, while it seems like the stars are aligning, I think how she's being received in TNA and the fact that after all of this time, even after all the wrestling she's done, she's not been able to escape that chant. Yes, Mr. Stone is there. Yes, Nikita Lyons is there. But now, let me say this. If for some reason she crosses the line, her first and only opponent should be Jada Parker.
Ooh.
And let Jada Parker stand up for the entire community and knock her back to TNA.
I mean, that is dream booking at its finest. But here's okay. What you said is correct. What you said is very correct, and definitely something to think about, and definitely play a massive factor in terms of how she's been received. And
I'm sorry, I'm going to add one more thing to it. They're already getting backlash in the IWC about this Alberto Del Rio potential signing because of the AAA thing. So I don't think they want to add to that. That was already so. That's again more reasons why I don't think it's happening. I'm sorry. Back to you.
No. That's a good point. It was something I was going to add as well. So it makes sense. And it was something I was going to even mention when we were talking about Partick Clark as well. Obviously, they've stayed away from doing that. They've cancelled or shut down the whole Hogan thing. And we've seen Tessa kind of it's been consistent that she's getting the reaction that she's getting. But what if? What if? We said it earlier about Velveteen. We said it about Hogan. What if everything that she's doing backstage aligns with, her showing remorse and her showing, having the right attitude and all these kinds of things? Because at the end of the day, and Triple H said this himself about 2 weeks ago about the reaction of fans sometimes or what they say online and stuff like that isn't real. So yes, they may be getting the response that she's getting, but if everything else is working out, do you think that there's still a possibility it could happen? I mean, in my mind, there is.
Yeah, but, to that particular point, if those chants were coming from the IWC alone, then maybe.
Fair.
But those chants are because one of the other things that Triple H said was we pay attention to what's happening in the arena.
True.
And so in the arena is where those chants are coming, and they're loud. And it's actually kind of crazy watching, Tom Hannafin and Matt Raywald try to talk over it in TNA because they're clearly hearing it. And they're trying to think, how do I make this work? Okay, what do I say over this, et cetera, et cetera? They might allude to it very briefly, but that's a difficult job for them to do. I don't think that Vic Joseph wants to do that. And I'm not speaking for Vic. I don't think that Booker T would want to do that. And I'm not speaking for him. I don't think that they want to have to step into that space because, again, if it's happening in the arena and that's what Triple H cares about, now you can't ignore it. You can't say that that's only on the internet because you hear it. They're watching the TNA pay-per-views. They hear this. They see what's happening.
They're there backstage.
Yeah. So I think the closest it happens is for those WWE stars to show up on TNA because I don't think we're going to see her on WWE turf.
And that's fair. And I believe, in terms of the whole thing with Alberto Del Rio, obviously we were talking about WWE giving him a contract. Of course, with the whole acquisition of AAA, I believe it's come out that it's not so much them giving him a new contract; it's just them taking control of the current contract.
Sure.
That these AAA wrestlers have signed and are under as well. And I believe it's been mentioned or at least reported that there are a handful of stars in AAA who could be seen on WWE TV, and his name wasn't one of them. So they're doing their damage control in that respect, and I kind of see that happening with Tessa, but I can guarantee you, and I definitely don't know. I'm not in the space. I'm not there. I don't have insider knowledge and none of that. People reporting to me, nothing like that at all. But I can confidently assume that a lot of this TNA WWE partnership came with, the incentive or the possibility of having Tessa Blanchard on NXT. But given the consistent response, it probably is less likely to happen. But it's just interesting how it's Victoria Crawford that she's teaming with. It's Nikita Lyons that's also involved in the match, given some of her controversies, or the responses, I guess, controversial responses that she's had from the IWC or the black contingency of the IWC over the last few years or so. It's interesting. It's just interesting, but I don't want to read too much into it. I really don't. But we'll see what happens. It makes for interesting TV. It gives us something to talk about, I guess, more than anything else. Speaking of women, in the wrestling world as well, something else that happened, I believe it was during the Backlash pre-show.
Yes.
Big E had something to say, and it was in regards to Becky Lynch versus Lyra Valkyria. Mm-hmm. He mentioned that people are seeing it as a passing of the torch, seeing as there were two Irish women wrestlers. Lyra Valkyria kind of come up under Becky Lynch, or aspiring to be like Becky Lynch as she was coming up through the ranks in wrestling in general. And people see it as a passing of the torch. But then he, and I believe Becky Lynch has mentioned this as well, but he kind of, challenged this whole thing of Becky Lynch only being in her mid-30s or mid to late 30s. Mm-hmm. And why is it that women in that age bracket are expected to pass the torch to the next woman coming up when their male counterparts are in probably, in their 50s when they start doing that, or whatever else. We mentioned, or someone else mentioned on the show as well, that, Randy Orton is around 45 and still talking about having another 10 years to go. John Cena is how old John Cena is, and so many others. Most of the people that are at the top of the ladder in wrestling are in their 40s, whether it be mid to, early to mid 40s. Why do you think it's different for women? And I'm going to throw this in there as well. About 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, Naomi was talking on the Nikki and Brie show about the possibility of her run at the moment possibly being her last run, because she wants to think about family, and if they don't do it now, it probably will never happen. Mm-hmm. Why do you think there is this double standard when it comes to the age of women to the age of men, and them kind of hanging their boots up in the pro wrestling space?
I think there's always been a double standard when it comes to women and men in just about any genre. The expectation of, men to be able to do this. However, now, truth be told, in the sport of pro wrestling, ageism has been an issue.
Yes.
And it's the issue that people don't really want to talk about. It's been an issue all throughout pro wrestling, particularly in American pro wrestling, where there are people, fans in particular, who will say, well, so-and-so is 39, they're 40. They do, now we need time for young blood and new blood, et cetera, et cetera. When over our counterparts in Japan, I think specifically about Pro Wrestling Noah, where on their shows, while the wrestlers are there, they will put up their stats, and their stats include their weight, their location, and their age. And I can't tell you how many wrestlers I've seen come through there in their late 40s and early 50s. You look at some of the stars in New Japan, I think about Suzuki, or I think about oh man, his name is escaping me now, and that's bothering me. But a lot of their wrestlers are definitely in their late 40s, early 50s. Mm-hmm. And even if we talk about what we're seeing currently in WWE, Sheamus just made his return last week, and Sheamus is 47. AJ Styles and Finn Balor went at it last night. AJ is 47. Rey Mysterio is a Hall of Famer who's wrestling every week at age 50, right? R-Truth is 53. Carlito is 46. Randy Orton is 45. Shelton Benjamin is 49. Right? Like, I mean, to me, it's the issue should never be age. The issue should be ability.
Right.
And so if you're able to keep going, if you're able to still do well in the ring, if you're able to still tell great stories, Bobby Lashley is in his late 40s, right? Like, why is age an issue? I think that is an unfortunate construct. And I think with women, it gets more difficult because there's this expectation of, oh, well, what if they want to get pregnant and start a family? As if after having a baby, they can't go back to work. When in just about every other profession, after you have a baby, you go back to work. Granted, pro wrestling's a physical sport, but other athletes don't stop being athletes because they have children. So I think Big E, standing up and saying this, I've been on this soapbox for the last couple of years because, again, I think it is a tragedy that we want to just throw people away because they hit a certain age, not because they can no longer put butts in seats, not because they're no longer good at what they do, but because they've hit a magical age. I think that's crazy. So I'm glad that Big E stood up and said what he said. And I think it's a great example for everybody who's paying attention for how to utilize your privilege as an ally. Okay. Sure. Big E, as a man, has certain privilege that women do not. And so by being able to stand up as a man and advocating for the fact that, no, this isn't a passing of the torch. She still has a lot left in the tank. When Mark Henry said it, we thought, oh, that's so cool. But if Becky Lynch says it, it's like, oh, well, it's time for her to get out of the way. Stop playing.
Right.
And see, people only have that issue when it's not them. When it's you and people are trying to push you out of what you love to do because they say you're too old, then all of a sudden now we need to wave the flag about ageism. No, I think again, Big E was a great advocate in a space where he didn't have to be, but he chose to lend his power. And I think that's a great example for everybody who believes in advocacy and who believes in utilizing your privilege, because all of us to some degree have privilege. This is how you lend your privilege and your advantage. So thank you, Big E.
No, for sure. I echo the same thing. It takes for a lot to stand up for someone and for something as well. It wasn't a direct question he was asked. It wasn't, he wasn't asked to share his opinion on it. Probably no one expected him to do that. He probably didn't prompt anyone and say, oh, I'm going to say so and so. He just did it. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think, that's needed a lot more just in the wrestling space, as we do what we do here. It's all about standing up for those that don't have enough of a voice. Yes. And as much as we do this mainly for Black wrestling in general, I would like to think that we would do it just for any level of or type of injustice that we see in the wrestling space and say something when we get the chance or when we feel the need to as well. Exactly why I kind of brought up the whole thing. It just so happened that Big E was the one that said it, which kind of made it a little bit easier to mention it on the show. But at the same time, I'm glad it happened to where we can and do that. I'm going to end on this on a sad note, but we're still talking about women's wrestling, but on a slightly sadder note. But it makes for interesting things moving forward. New Japan Pro Wrestling had their resurgence live event over the weekend as well. And unfortunately, a one Mercedes Moné, formerly known as Sasha Banks, lost her New Japan Pro Wrestling Strong Championship in a triple threat match. She wasn't involved in the decision. She wasn't pinned, but she's now lost her championship. What makes this all the more interesting? One, going back a little bit. One, it was the main event of the show. Phenomenal. Right. Beautiful. Two, we also know that, she is set to face Jamie Hayter in the Women's Owen Hart Memorial Cup. And the winner will face Toni Storm. We've said it many times on here over the past few weeks that we expect the winner to be Mercedes. Yeah. With her losing the New Japan Strong Championship, her now holding, I'm not sure if it's only two or it's three.
It's technically 2 championships but 3 belts.
Okay. I
Because
understand.
it's the undisputed Rev Pro Women's Championship
Yeah,
has
it's two
championship
belts. That's the
belts.
one.
Mhm.
Okay. I got confused with that one, but that's what it is.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Is that just a prelude to what we've been expecting to happen when she faces or is expected to face Tony
Yeah.
Storm at All In?
I think it is. I think it's making room. I mean, think about it. As big as that AEW Women's World Championship is, where exactly would she put all the other championships? I don't know. What I do think this does, and we talked about this last week in terms of how does one make Mercedes Moné look like she could reasonably lose? This is how,
Of
right?
course.
Like her losing one of her championships, the strong championship, which that was a major championship that she had held on to for quite some time.
Mhm.
For her to lose that says that there is a chink in the armor. And so that perhaps gives Jamie Hayter some chance because, hey, she hadn't lost a match since she's returned to pro wrestling.
True.
He just hasn't. So,
True.
for this to be a loss, and even with her shoulders not getting pinned in a triple threat match, it's still a loss. So I think that starts, if AEW tells this story right, then it starts to make you think, does Jamie Hayter have a shot? Is Mercedes Moné too focused on the loss of the New Japan Strong Championship that she can't focus on the AEW Women's World Championship? Or does it light a fire under her? There are lots of ways they can tell that story. I'm shocked. I did not expect her to lose. I didn't see a Mercedes Moné loss coming for a while. So this is somewhat shocking, yet I do think it is to make room for the AEW Women's World Championship because none of the other championships that she holds really is on the same level as the AEW Women's World Championship, or at least isn't supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
The Strong Championship was, again, their mid-card women's championship.
Correct.
The TBS Championship, again, the mid-card women's championship. The Rev Pro women's title, again, is just the title of that particular brand, not necessarily a worldwide brand. So I think this is, you have to kind of it's almost like having 4 part-time jobs and then you land the big job, right? You land the big super salaried contract situation. You got to start letting those other part-time gigs go. And I think that's what we're seeing happen.
Very, very true. And what's interesting about all of this as well is in the match, she lost to, AZM's the new champion.
Yeah.
Mina Shirakawa was in, however you say it, Azumi. Sorry.
Yeah, right.
My bad. Mina Shirakawa was involved in the match, and it was how it all kind of happened is Shirakawa threw Mercedes out of the ring. Azumi's then, pinned Shirakawa. Yeah. Mercedes has blown off at Shirakawa, and then there's obviously talk of Shirakawa's imminent return to AEW as well. So we could see, them two go at it very soon. There maybe even is space in this space to All In for Mercedes to possibly lose the TBS Championship or lose it not long after All In, maybe hold it to and then lose it not long after All In to maybe Shirakawa, which would be brilliant. She's a big enough name. It would be a level of revenge as well because it was Shirakawa. It was Shirakawa who Mercedes Moné beat to get the Rev Pro Women's Undisputed British Championship. Right. So there's that, and we've seen that whole thing with Willow and Mercedes and their the New Japan Strong having a bit of a story, the TBS Championship, all of that as well. So all of that could happen. But I believe, as you said, it's making room for the big one. The big one being the AEW Women's Championship. Something that we also talked about, I believe, last week was this whole thing where it kind of like felt as though because the first exchange for Tony Storm and the finalists of the Owen Cup was Mercedes, it kind of made us feel as though, okay, they're kind of telling us what's about to happen. Thankfully, they've kind of righted or wrong in a way. We've seen Jamie Hayter getting involved in a bigger way and whatnot. But you know, it adds to the mystique of the possibility Jamie could win. But I mean, my mind hasn't changed at all. No. My mind has not changed at all. I feel as though it's set in stone, and would actually be a mistake if they don't do it.
Agreed.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I want to see it happen. It's just going to be interesting to see how it happens because, as we said already last week, there's so many weeks left. Just for the cup final, and then to All In, there are so many weeks left.
So long.
So many weeks left, and so much could happen. But we'll see what happens. Gosh, with that said, we are at the end of the show. Gerard, tell the people where they can find you, and how they. Just how they can find you.
Yeah, for sure. You can find me at Bonnerfied across all of the social spaces. You can check me out weekly on Saturday Night Vibe. That is the television show for All Caribbean Wrestling. That is on Tempo Networks every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern. You can also check that out on the mobile app for All Caribbean Wrestling. And you can check it out on Roku as well for Android, Apple, and somewhere else. I don't remember where else, but Roku for sure. You can check it out. And you can check us out on Triller TV as well. In addition, you can check me out with Ashe Wrestling at AsheWrestling.com. You can check out our Vegas show, which is available there. And we've got an upcoming show happening in June the 28th, which is going to be crazy. It's the Return of the King. Cedric Alexander makes a return, and we've just announced some matches. It's Cedric Alexander against Yaya, which is going to be crazy. We also have a rematch for the Ashe Wrestling Men's Championship. The Battle of the Dariuses, Part 2. Darius Lockhart, Darius Carter for the Ashe Wrestling Men's Championship. And then there is more on the Ashe Wrestling Women's Tournament happening then as well. So it's going to be a big, big time. Just finished a big show with Southern Honor that will be on IWTV very soon. And of course, you can check out my work with the Nightmare Factory at the Nightmare Factory's YouTube page. And of course, the Nightmare Factory, WWEID, All Caribbean Wrestling, some WWEID things happening as well. So just a fun time. Again, check it all out at Bonnerfied.
Also, say his name. He shall appear. He's everywhere. Absolutely everywhere.
Podcast network as well. Check that out.
See what I mean? Of course, you can catch us here as well every Tuesday, 6 p.m. UK time. I believe at the moment, I'm helping you out here. It's 1 p.m. Eastern. Work it out wherever else you are.
Yes.
But if you don't catch us live, of course, you can just still go on to the BWA YouTube channel and catch us on demand on there too. You can find me and any other news, stories, interesting things regarding Black Wrestling at Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram. And you might see me pop every now and again on X, which is BWA Dazzle. Until next time, guys, see you soon.